It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Getting into it on this 16th of October, Thursday, a day after we heard the news of the demise of Raila Odinga. And we continue with those conversations this morning, even as we say, may he rest in peace. We'll go through times where those who strategically, politically, family-wise, friendship-wise, dealt with him, were in his same space, and we'll have those conversations this morning to remember the man who touched Kenya and indeed who touched the world. We see this from the different messages that come from north, east, west and south, whether it's of the continent, whether it's of the globe. Those are coming in and they keep trickling in, and so we will have those conversations with those people as often as we can over the next couple of days. And right now, joining us in the studio, we have two gentlemen who, Strategic Communications Advisor Dr. Barrack Muluka is here with us this morning. Dr. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Karibu sana. Thanks for being here this morning. Tony Gachoka is also the former Director of Protocol Office of the Prime Minister, of course, dealing directly with Raila Odinga. He's here as well this morning. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, and poleni kwa Wakenya, kuna kwa familia ya hayati Prime Minister Raila Odinga.
Indeed. Karibu sana. Thank you for joining us today as we go through this. Many things are happening at the moment, and it's interesting because even then we still have a proverb, and it's interesting to hear what it is today. We've been in Liberia, and Dennis, you want to share that with us? We'd like to hear what you think.
Well, I'll go straight to the proverb from Liberia. Teeth and tongue can fight, but they will never stop working together to eat.
TG, if you want to become the governor of Nairobi, I think you should take a first shot about teeth and tongue.
Yes, I would simply say that, the way in which things work in unison is part of order. So that actually biologically in creation, the human being was also created with organs that have to be in sync, so that the teeth are chewing while the tongue is turning the food. In cows, they do carding, where there is a very sophisticated unison. It's almost like a value chain. What comes in is chewed, turned, then swallowed. I think it's all about harmony. It's all about doing things correctly in order that you actually chew and swallow successfully. So I look at it more like a success of coordination, success of using the same tools to achieve the same goal by having a proper synced operation of some kind or the other. So, for example, if you're driving a car, you know where the hazard is, you where the gearbox and where the brakes are, and you look left and right to avoid an accident, to have sync in the things that you do.
I've read somewhere that the enamel in the teeth is the hardest substance in the human body. And the tongue is actually the softest tissue in the human body. Sometimes you need a combination of both the tough and the soft. They may not always work together in harmony. Sometimes the teeth tend to bite the tongue, but in the end they need one another. You probably need both hard skills and soft skills.
Oh, there you go. So at about this time yesterday, we started to hear the rumors, right? And there was chatter about, and even for us in the media and communication space, of course, it was very loud. And maybe a couple of hours later, it was confirmed that Raila Odinga had passed away. Of course, through the day yesterday, we got more details, and it come as a shock, isn't it? They say that one of the only sure things about life is death. But this came as a shock for somebody who's been in Kenya space for the last 40 years. And of course, many thoughts are going through. And I want to start off with you, Dr. Muluka, and we're going to take reference to a story that's in the Standard this morning. Son of the bull who baffled all, chartered his own charted his own path and shaped political duels for decades. How do you remember Raila Odinga? It's weird that we are saying a day after his death, we're asking how you remember him. And just 24 hours ago, he's still this enigma.
Yes, I think I need also to acknowledge that I am the brain behind the story that you refer to in the Standard.
It's your story, yeah.
And therefore, to a very great extent, it says what I think. But allow me first to enjoin myself in the messages of condolence to the family of Raila Odinga, Mama Ida, their children, Rosemary, Winnie, and Junior, and the rest of the extended Odinga family, the ODM fraternity, the people of Luo Nyanza at large, and of course the entire African nation, our country, Kenya included. It is the loss of a political giant. Raila Odinga's soulmate rest in eternal peace. Raila was a complex character, a complex entity. I described him once as an institution. You could not quite deal with him as an individual politician. He was an institution, a behemoth of an entity. In terms of things like political parties, we saw that where he moved, that space became a political party. If he moved from Ford Kenya and went into NDP, the little herd of NDP would suddenly become a major political party. And if he migrated with NDP to Kanu, it became New Kanu. And if he moved out of Kanu, he left that entity wounded and staggering. My good friend Tony Gachoka, whom I refer to fondly as TG, is here. And I know that he belongs to Kanu, but he probably will want to admit that Raila Odinga administered a blow to Kanu that has left it staggering more than 2 decades later. They still stagger on. They probably are going to find their feet again. But such was this person called Raila Odinga. He was a courageous individual, a general who led from the front lines, not a kind of commander in chief who waits in some back room somewhere, in no pun intended, but in a situation room, and commands from there. He would be like King David in the Bible, who is leading his forces from the front line, soaking in tear gas, running into the headwind of live bullets, but believing in that which he thought was right. Never mind, other people may think it is wrong, but he stood firmly by that which he believed in. He was also capable of compromise. However, when he saw the advantages, or thought that he saw the advantages, he was a very colorful political player on this national landscape and beyond. The only regret is that he was that fantastic dribbler who got before the goalmouth and seemed not to know what to do with the ball after that. Very powerful performance, which in the end leads me to summarize him in one sentence as a great man who did great things for his country, but also occasionally made great mistakes. And I think the greatest mistake was the dalliance with the Kenya Kwanza government, which my good friend TG here and the Kanu boss Gideon Moi have also just made. Otherwise, an amazing mercurial, colorful political operative. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Tony, you worked with Raila Odinga, but beyond working with him, you were his friend.
I loved Raila, and he loved me. And part of this business, Barrack, luckily, is not just a friend of mine, but he's one of those Kenyans who actually went to school. So when he speaks not just well, but profoundly. You know, I met Raila in the 90s because at that time, as aspiring journalist, I was working with Gachoka, then of the Finance magazine. At that time, there were very few what we call the alternative press. Itobu Imanyara had the Nairobi Law Monthly, and the Weekly Review was a paper that was not as hostile to the state, but was still read among the alternative press. So being a member of the fourth estate, the death of Josephat Karanja allowed an opportunity in Githunguri for my publisher to vie. So Jeho Gatabaki vied for Githunguri and won, and then became an MP simply by the vacant seat left by Dr. Karanja. And because of that, Parliament became our home. So he was half a legislator, half a publisher, and I spent many years and months in Parliament. Among the people I met in that sojourn was Baba Raila Odinga. We formed a friendship, and beyond Parliament, we started talking about many things, which then led to us joining the Orange Movement, which was a constitutional agitation for a better constitutional framework that later became a political party called the Orange Democratic Movement Kenya. And that party was formed to fight and acquire political power. Now, ironically, when that party was formed, it was taken from Baba by Dan Manzo, who is a regular here. He's the one who engineered it with the late Mutula Kilonzo, and they got the party for Kalonzo Musyoka. So by the time Baba was standing around, he had the movement leader, but there was no party. At that time, the Kikuyus in power, Paul Muite and Kiraito Murungi and Murungaro looked for me. And I went to see Muite here on Mombasa Road. There was a place called Chomazon. Uko nyuma, there was a place of Koroga or Indi. He told me, now we have a party called ODM. And this party we registered to split the oranges. Now, if we give it to Baba, he will not believe it. So you take it to Baba, and Baba is going to be very happy. So I called Baba, who was in Kisumu, and we met in secret at JKIA, straight to his current home. So me, Baba, and Ida are sitting, and I'm handing them over ODM with the young lady then called Jane Wangui, who was the Secretary General. She's now a minister at the Sakaja's government. But the long and short of it was ODM was actually handed over by the government of Kibaki to Raila Odinga to split the oranges. So how history is written from then on, Baba and I became comrades. And since that time, he then became the Prime Minister. He appointed Muhammad Izahakia to be the Permanent Secretary, Karuri Omondi to be the Chief of Staff, and then Tony Gachoka to be the Director of Protocol. And from then on, we, for many years, remained not just friends, but colleagues. And so I worked with Mzee on a day-to-day basis. And so here falls a giant of this nation, and he may now be in heaven, but what he's going to live here, I think for me, one of the highlights of Raila Odinga's life is his role in the constitutional dispensation, for which he was so passionate, that the fight from a single-party state to a multi-party state, and the attendant constitutional growth that the country has. If anybody knew Raila, would probably say that that is what he would say was his biggest achievement, that this country has a 2010 constitution, and in it a Bill of Rights, and in it a multi-party democratic state.
Well, the president yesterday, Barrack, was swift to do a number of things. And one of those was to declare that there would be a state funeral for Raila Odinga. This speaks volumes in terms of not how an individual views him, but how the nation, the continent, the world views him. You don't give a state funeral just to anybody. And beyond the words, or maybe what Kenyans would want, what impact, what meaning does that bear on really how Raila Odinga was revered, or how he was seen?
It is both the right thing to do and the expedient thing to do. I'll dispose of the expedient thing to do first. The passing on of Raila Odinga throws President William Ruto's plans and thoughts about a second term into a spin. Is basically in a quagmire, and he will be thinking about how to reorder things within that space of Luo Nyanza, especially where we have been hearing the clarion call of 2 terms coming from in a very profound sense. And so there's a sense in which President William Ruto would want to perpetuate himself in that region and within that community, and he must do things that edify the memory of Raila Odinga in his passing, and particularly how this final journey and the exit is done. And I think he's doing very, very well. We have seen that he has dispatched a team to India, which we are told should be arriving within the next 2 hours, perhaps slightly.
Actually, they entered Somalia a few hours ago. They're almost crossing through Ethiopia. I'm just following the flight right now.
Yes.
So in the next 2 hours, like you've rightly put, then they should be landing at JKIA.
They should be landing at JKIA. And we've seen that they're going to make their way all the way to State House itself, and which is the one address that very correctly belonged to Raila Odinga, but which he never quite got to become the principal resident. TG has told us about how they made that effort. There are those who, within their heart of hearts, like myself, believe very firmly that Raila Odinga won the 2007
general election, presidential election,
and it was taken away from him. I'm a little surprised that it was taken away from him by those who gave him the party on whose ticket he ran. Thank you, TG, for that anecdote. We will be pursuing it further in scholarly environments to establish its wider significance. But I think that tells you the story of this towering figure, a man who suffered for this country. He was detained for an accumulative just under 10-year period. A man who was forced to flee to the frigid exile of the global north because of standing up for his country. An individual whom, as we have said, was fired at with live bullets. An individual whose health got compromised on account of the kind of attrition that successive...
In fact, I can talk a bit about that. You know, Mzee for a very long time had a problem with his eyes. In fact, if you noticed, he would always have a hanky because he kept tearing on the eye, and this was some of the horrific injuries he got when in incarceration. And then the back, his back was because, you know, the lodgings in the cells for 8 years are really hard on the back, and for very many years, and I don't know whether you know how discs in the back can really, and so for a very long time Mzee was really in pain through the back and went several times to hospital in Dubai to try and get that rectified. In Dubai there are these now German hospitals, European hospitals that are docile there, so you actually don't have to go to Europe to get that kind of care. And then finally Mzee for a long time was suffering from diabetes. And I understand that at some point now, in the last 2-3 months, the diabetes was getting out of hand. And there could have been some problems with his kidneys. And perhaps when the medical reports come out, part of what actually led to the deteriorating health could have been some of the organs being affected by some of the chronic issues that he was battling over the years, which was not at all helped by his incarceration. I may also want here to send my condolences, as Barrack did, to Mama Ida and her children, Rosemary, Winnie, and Junior. Of course, the brother Oburu Odinga, the sister Ruth, and Ambassador Menya. All of them should get from the Situation Room our condolences and wishing them, God's comfort as they deal with this.
Very as well.
Exactly. Yeah, very, very hard time for them.
Indeed.
So I hope they will get the grace and courage to bear.
People at large want to then be able to experience these last moments when they are able to say a goodbye and greet the fallen Raila Odinga, and they'll get an opportunity to do that. News just coming to us is that tomorrow, the 17th of October, has been declared a public holiday, and so we know that there will be throngs of people also then being able to look at pictures coming in, and that you'll be able to get on KTN as well of the preparations that are being made for Raila Odinga then to be brought from JKIA. He will then, I believe, have some preparations done at Lee Funeral Home, and then he will go on to Parliament, where there will be public viewing until about 5 p.m. this afternoon. Just speak to that in terms of what it does for people to then be able to go to Parliament buildings and say a goodbye, and then be able to, sleep over in Karen tonight, for people to then be able to say goodbye and then to move on to Kisumu, where obviously there is a large following or constituent of people who would not see this as proper if they didn't get a chance to.
Maybe as Barrack deals with that, I want to quickly just squeeze in credentials of Baba that are global. I mean, just yesterday night I got a call from Ambassador Michael Randberger, who was, for the period Raila was Prime Minister, the U.S. Ambassador to Kenya. And which I shared with SpiceFM some of the letter that he had written as a message of condolences. And in it, he was acknowledging Raila Odinga's role in helping solve the post-election violence that had rocked this country. And I can give you the insight of that was at the point where things had reached a point where the country was actually not stopping at all. Mzee Raila was invited to the U.S. Embassy, and I accompanied him. And Reinberger intervened by calling Barack Obama. And this was a lot of work behind the scenes that then led to talking to Kofu, who was then the head of the African Union, was the first step for him to come to see if at all there could be any mediation. When Kofu came, he proposed Cyril Ramaphosa, and that was unacceptable to Mwai Kibaki. And again, then another name was brought, that of Kofi Annan. So it is that discussion where the Americans were very involved in looking for a mediator that eventually Mwai Kibaki felt comfortable with Kofi Annan and Baba Raila Odinga as well. But the point that Reinberger was making in this letter was there was a lot of give and take, and Raila then demonstrated that he was ready to give and take, and for talks under Kofi Annan to begin in earnest, and that brought into a new chapter, the new government of national unity that was to be born of the Annan talks. Barrack, maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, just as I thought about that question also to you, Barrack, I think about yesterday, and before 11 p.m., the country had erupted, and in different pockets, whether you went from Kericho to Kisumu to Kakamega to here in Nairobi, different parts of the city, Outer Ring, Langata, coming in from Syokimau, Mlolongo, everybody was pouring into the streets, essentially, to mourn this. And so there's no question of the impact that this man had on Kenya.
Yes, at this age, having had the great grace to begin gravitating towards the 7th floor. I have witnessed many passings. Unfortunately, you have to witness passings. And the passing on of Raila Odinga knocks us breathless. It reminds us of the passing of Jomo Kenyatta in 1978. I was a 20-year-old youth. We couldn't believe that Jomo Kenyatta had passed on. He was one of those persons who, in our minds, we had made bigger than life. Such people don't die. They probably don't die. That's why so many decades later we are still talking about them. Raila Odinga belongs to that class of people. And of course, 2 or so other passings, perhaps because of the trauma that informed them, would be that of J.M. Kariuki. As a young man in high school, I recall again the shock and awe in 1975 in the month of March. The passing on of Ronald Ngala in 1972, again, how it shocked us as a nation. And of course, I still remember where I was in 1969 in July when we heard that a great man had stopped a bullet in the streets of Nairobi, and that was the passing on of Tom Mboya. There have been others which we cannot minimize by any sense of imagination. But this particular passing on belongs into those spaces of exceptional shock and awe, and we have got to come to terms with them. There's a sense in which we people from the Lake Basin, and not from the Lake Basin, which covers basically the Luo, Luhya, and Kisii people, we have a certain way in which we bring closure to the demise of one of our own, particularly a giant of this magnitude. We are expressive, we cry, we find catharsis, we find peace in doing all manner of things. So we were telling Luo, Luhya youth to go easy. Some of them were already in the streets, in the southern bypass, demonstrating, attempting to throw objects. Traditionally, people would even be cutting down banana plantations, they would be cutting trees, they would be in all manner of ecstasy. It's a way of achieving catharsis and coming to terms with the ugly reality that this particular individual is no longer with us. And it is a practice which I think has spread everywhere in the country as a factor of social and cultural contagion. And people will come out to be very expressive, to cry. Traditionally, there were people in this country, communities, that did not even have a look at a dead body, human remains.
I have a message for President William Ruto, and I also have a message for the family and the party of ODM. This is a moment where presidential balance, presidential etiquette is going to be fully tested. Raila Odinga, an enigma of Kenyan politics, is beyond the broad-based government. He's beyond the confines of the Orange Democratic Movement that I gifted to him. He is beyond Luo Nyanza, where he was born, and he is beyond the greater region of Western Kenya, where he hails from. Raila Odinga has become an icon in Kenya because he personifies and embodies the nationhood of Kenya. There are very few people born on this soil that carry to heaven the credentials that my brother Raila Odinga has and has with him, those of a selfless struggle, that of a people driven, a people's president, a people's hero. He is in death a hero as he can never have been in life. And I would want to urge the government and those who are planning this funeral to make it a moment that has the stature and character of nationhood, and not that he was mine or he was yours, because he was ours. And I remember at the death of Princess Diana and the mood in England, above even the monarchy itself, they came up with the People's Princess. And Diana was buried by the people of England until they even sang a song for her that they were called The Flower of England. And so I would want today to remind Kenyans that some of my deepest memory with Raila Odinga was sitting with people you'd never thought you'd sit with. I had a lovely, lovely session with Raila and the late Charles Jonjo.
Right.
He loved Charles Jonjo, and they came from opposite temporal positions in politics. But Raila had this ability, even when he attended the funeral of President Moi, who was his jailer and who had put him in incarceration, Raila would actually never stand and speak of his pain or suffering. He had this ability to shake hands that you never thought he would. He shook the hand of Moi and became KANU Secretary General. He shook the hand of Mwai Kibaki and formed the National Unity Government. He shook the hand of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and they became partners in the last election in Azimio. He then shook recently the hand of William Samoei Ruto in what we are now talking about, a broad-based government.
That's interesting, Tony, that you say that, because and also to kind of bring you in, because we could speak to the character that he was then able to come off what may have been envisioned as a high horse and say, well, I can accommodate this because I'm not doing it for me, that I'm doing it for Kenya. And that whereby a number of folks would have been able to castigate him and say that you shook hands because you wanted to see what was in it for you. But that's interesting in terms of the perspective that you bring in here, that he may have been with the shorter end of the stick, but said, you know what? Let me shake hands with you. He went and saw former President Moi, whom he probably would have accorded a lot of the suffering that both of you allude to in terms of his incarceration at some point, but went and shook hands with him, sat with him in the final days, and, you know, essentially mended fences, shook hands with him. And then in an election which, according to you, again, he most evidently won, but was able to shake hands with an individual, of course, through the help of the likes of Benjamin Kappa and the late Kofi Annan, but still was able to shake hands and said, okay, for Kenya, let's move on. And then still, again, came and shook hands with Uhuru Kenyatta and said, for Kenya, let's shake hands and move on. And did the same thing with Ruto to an extended degree. Was it for Kenya? Does it speak to a man who was able to say, I feel rotten, and with a human perspective, I wouldn't even imagine to shake your hand. But for Kenya, I'm going to shake hands.
First, I think he always had the longer end of the stick. The other persons may occupy the seat of power, having gotten there through whichsoever machinations they employed to get there, but Raila Odinga always had the longer end of the stick, and whenever he got into those spaces, there's a very significant sense in which we must admit that he placed the country above the self. If he didn't want to place the country above the self, he would have gone the Jonas Savimbi way. Indeed, in 2017, 2018, I was quite close. So we had the entity that we called NASA. And The people were waiting, actually. They believed that Raila Odinga would lead them in a march to State House, to mount a siege on State House and evict President Uhuru Kenyatta. But that was not what he had in mind. He didn't want to take the country the DRC way, the Central African Republic way. He thought that he could find a mechanism for rapprochement with those who occupied the seat of power. And with the exception, because I think we must say the truth, we are documenting as we sit here and talk, we are documenting and packaging this information for fraternity. So I must say this, that with the exception of the dalliance with the Kenya Kwanza government, Raila Odinga took the high values that he represented into those spaces. And within those spaces, we were able as a nation to enjoy gain, social gain, economic gain, political gain. With Moi, the thought of reviewing the constitution in spite of the checkered path that it took was born in earnest. With President Mwai Kibaki, there was enormous economic growth, but the greatest pick of the basket was the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and which constitution's benefits Kenyans enjoy up to this moment. The fact that we can assemble here around this equipment and reflect and ventilate is not something that is to be taken for granted. With President Uhuru Kenyatta, the country was restored from the brink of disaster. With President William Ruto, I will reserve my comments for now, except to observe that it has been unmitigated disaster. Bad, poor finishing.
I wanted to say that Raila Odinga was a flawed man. I also want to be clear so that there is a fair balance in history. Among the most challenging part of Raila Odinga's history was the political support for the coup d'etat of 1982, where various elements of the armed air force attempted to overthrow then, in a military coup, the government of the late President Moi. And history is, not really clear as to which role everybody played. But that's what led to the 8 years or so of detention that surrounded Raila Odinga as Moi became more and more paranoid after the attempted coup and began to assert more and more authoritarian rule. The other issue is on the failed election campaign of Azimio. I myself went to see Raila Odinga at his office at Capitol Hill. In fact, I was accompanied by my friend Mainjeru. And the reason of going to see my friend Raila was to tell him the Kikuyu community is not boarding. This idea that you have Martha Karua with you, it may look very good on paper, but I'm telling you, this thing is not working. I told Mzee myself that something here is going on, and I urged him not to let go of Musalia Mudavadi before the earthquake. I really said you need to retain the NASA arsenal, and you need not believe that this Mount Kenya quest is going to come to you. And if history of Raila will ever be written, it will also be the fascination he has with the Mount Kenya. And for the up 10th time, they never come to him. I do not know whether people say it is language, whether people say it is culture. Since the separation of Jaramogi and Jomo Kenyatta in 1960s that led to the Little General Election of 1967, the Luo nation and the Kikuyu nation have pretended, have masqueraded that somehow they love each other and come together. But deep down there, it's more competitive than AFC
till now
versus Gor Mahia. Because look, it is just see, you test it. I mean, it has been tested in 5 elections, and every time you go to Mount Kenya, they have this word they used to use against Baba, and I don't want to say it here now, but they would use that word, and it seems to have got into the ethos. So one of the things that Baba may have regretted the most is never to have cracked the mountain. He used to tell me, tinga tinga itapanda mulima. And he of all the other achievements he had always wanted to go there. And I think with Martha Karua and SK Macharia and that brigade, he thought actually this time he can climb the mountain. So history will be written as to what happened and how William Ruto became the darling of Mount Kenya. Maybe he learned many Christian hymns.
In light of what you've said, I'm curious to find out from both of you. It's difficult to talk about Raila Odinga in the past. It's still very fresh to talk about the life that he lived, because, like Muluka said, well, he embraced the establishment. And though in many circumstances it would appear very controversial, and there are those who then looking at what you'd call his colossus of politics for decades. There are moments where people admired him, there are moments people feared, there are moments where people misunderstood Raila Odinga, but also as he fought within, he also was pursuing continental ambitions. And even as a lot of people say his domestic star, like papers have written, started to dim, and you said you don't want to get into the details of now his arrangement in the broad-based government, but I'm curious to find out what gap has he left, because many politicians have already spoken and said they're actually his sons. He mentored them. A lot of them got into positions of power and politics because Raila Odinga held their hands and said, I endorse this person. Now he's not there as Baba. Describe the kind of gap that he has now left.
Certainly when the great Iroko tree falls, it's difficult to replace it with another one. There must be others which have been growing. We will be asking the question, where are the suckers from the great banana plantation? And I think that they are there. If you want to see where your tomorrow will be, look at the young people around you, the people you have brought up. And I think that Raila Odinga's cubs are ready to pounce. I look not at his age mates or those who would be within the age set as he is, because those would be material for retirement basically. I will not look at my teacher, Professor Peter Anyang Nyong'o, who, as you are aware, at some point with my brother TG here, they went in different directions. They had Charity Ngilu and so on, Jim Orengo. I'll not talk about those ones because I think the distance ahead of them politically is much shorter than the distance that they have traveled. They belong more to people who are going to be remembered for what they have done rather than what they have yet to do. But when you look at the likes of Edwin Sifuna, you look at the likes of Babu Owino, and you look at the likes of Caleb Amisi, these are people who embrace and embody the original Raila Odinga spirit. Even some of us who are much older than the Sifunas, than the Babu Owinos, there are certainly lessons that we picked up from Raila Odinga. Hence our ability to look at the truth in the eye and call it by its name, to look at the lie in its eye and call it also by its name. And it should not surprise me that in the coming days, President William Ruto will be making overtures towards the Sifunas, the Babu Winos, the Caleb Amisis, trying to restabilize his table How far he will succeed, I don't know. But the seed that Odinga, Raila Amolo has planted, which is an ideological seed, is alive and well.
Obviously, we see the country completely different on this, Barrack Muluka and I, because this issue of Babu Wino is always brought everywhere, and this man can't even be elected an MP. You know, he was elected because he had Luya votes, he had Kamba votes, Kisi votes. If you go to Embakasi North, his makeup of his constituency was because Baba was the captain of a wider team. He was not elected as Babu Wino. I didn't interrupt you.
About being elected.
I'm just making the point that it is important to look back at what ODM was. ODM was, for the last 5 elections, in coalitions. It was in COD, it was before that Pentagon, before that it then became NASA, it became Azimio. So candidates who were elected under the banner, and Baba was very careful to brand a team. Many candidates who are elected, not just Babu Wino, many across the country were elected because of that plus game.
But isn't that the thing, Tony? Sorry.
I'm just being brief.
I get it. Sorry, but I just want to ask a question. Isn't that the thing, though, that we're saying that because of that mentorship for certain people who call themselves his sons,
yes,
he was able to foster the environment under which specific gentlemen that we see today.
I was just finishing because I don't want to get into the argument.
Where Tony Gachoka is coming
you see,
from.
For example, Sakaja, if you were to argue that there is a son of Baba in Nairobi, it would be Sakaja. Now, we don't have...
Or more.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He had more sons.
Yeah, and so on.
I think I'll come in here.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll come in here. Odinga, Raila Molo had more sons. Some sons have towered above the others. In the end, it's not a question of whether Babu Wino can be elected, whether he's electable or not. I'm talking more about the ideological orientation, the ideological seed that Raila Amolo Odinga has planted. And it is an ideological seed that has germinated and that will continue to flourish. If it is about being elected, Raila Odinga himself tried 5 times to be president. And he did not get...
it is not what I'm saying.
He did not get elected. But that notwithstanding, his towering influence remains. I think that's the kind of...
I just want to be very clear.
The kind of tuber
starting,
that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, starting from President William Ruto, including Barrack Muluka, nobody knows what this nuclear bomb is going to do. Raila Odinga's death has completely destabilized the entire current situation in Kenya Kwanza. It has destabilized the Nairobi politics. It has destabilized Nyanza politics. In this issue that because Mzee is there, that there will be some order, that somebody somewhere we can pinpoint is coming. There is total chaos. The chaos will emerge because even in ODM, before Mzee died, there were already forces in ODM pulling one way or the other. There will be ODM leadership fights. There will be realignments in Kenya Kwanza, where Baba occupies such a space. Who's going to fill that space? Already as we speak, he was telling me, KANU chairman Gideon Moi has joined the Kenya Kwanza regime. How will that augur with the rest of ODM or Musalia Mudavadi and the rest? How will that be rearranged? How will this death affect the by-elections? So all I am saying is that I don't think there is one person. That person, you can say, oh, that guy might inherit Baba because it's from Luo Nyanza. It might be Ali Hassan Joho.
Okay, so maybe
it might be somebody completely outside the Luo Nyanza.
So can I ask you then, Tony? Because the truth is that Raila Odinga did adopt many sons, and they will speak to that. We'll hear it. We've heard it. And there are many names, even within Nairobi. Edwin Sifuna, Babu Owino,
Tony Gachoka,
Johnson Sakaja.
Yes,
but that speaks to... And we forgot Tony. Does this not speak to...
Tony Gachoka.
Sure.
Yes.
So does this not speak to the fostering nature of him, or are we saying that are you saying that he had hangers-on who maybe would learn from his political prowess, but they would not pick anything to go towards leadership? Or are we just saying that, yes, there are many people today who, with his loss, when we saw visibly the pain that Edwin Sifuna is going through, we saw that. And these are folks that he mentored, that they would look up to him and say, okay, this is a path that he's charted, we can follow in it. Do we not have many examples of those young people, men and women, in Kenya today?
They are there, and we are going to be seeing them in the coming days. We saw that already some of them were even saying no to him. And one of the things that he excelled in was knowing when to say no. And the fact that within that circle, there are people who learned to say no to him, and whenever they occupied public space together, he would tell you, when you hear Edwin Sifuna speaking, that is the position of ODM. And there are others, and I don't doubt that TG could be one of them. Indeed, he's one of them. Historically, I have seen him within that space. We have had many conjunctures and disjunctures of thought, but certainly, TG, the very fact that you are here, and the very fact that we talk about these things, and the fact that you aspire to occupy political leadership within the elected landscape, is an indication that Raila Odinga has had political sons and daughters. There will be sibling competition within that space in the coming days, but they are there. He did a great job.
I would agree, and I would also want to add another thing which is important of how Raila grew. Raila used to tell me that he had a principle called the Fisher of Men. And he's very good at singing, Fisher of Men, Fisher of Men, and so on. And when we were at Light Note, he would always remind me about the need to add, plus, not minus, adding to make sure that the coalitions are stronger. And one of the challenges he's going to leave with him gone, is who has that stature to actually bring in 7-8 communities, people.
They will have to compete. You guys will have to compete. Remember the competition in Ford, Kenya. Remember the competition between Raila Odinga and Akinyi Oile, the Baghdad boys, the Talibans in Kisumu every Friday those days. There's going to be a bit of rapture before someone then towers above the rest.
Yeah, and I was very happy when I was thinking about this today as I was coming, because it reminds me of a conversation that we had with Mzee during the Orange Democratic Movement election, because this is a time when Kalonzo had gone with ODMK, and nobody knew about ODM. As I told you, when we got it to Mzee, we held it as a secret. So he did not want to let go of that information until a certain time. And I told him, government has given me ODM so that we split the orange. And he says, no, that is very good, because if that is what they've done, they are going to be surprised that it will not work. And when he actually launched ODM, it became such a big movement that ODM Kenya fizzled out. So that Mzee had this ability that even if it was a plan of the state to kind of have more oranges in order to split the Orange Democratic Movement, he was able to transcend that, overcome that by his own personality and political force. That ODM became a movement that nobody today talks about ODM Kenya. And that's the force of politics that we have lost, the giant we've lost. Therefore, him within the ranks of Winston Churchill. I've said here before what I wrote in my dissertation, that if there was no Hitler, who would have been Churchill? I wonder if there had been no dictatorships in this country, I wonder whether Raila would be Raila. But I also want to say, among the giants who have gone, Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Kenya's own Raila Odinga will go into the annals of history as a man who carried beyond the call of his duty. He, on the broad shoulders, he carried a nation and brought in the ideals and left to us one of the best written constitutions across the continent, across the world. And in that constitution endures and lives the spirit of the Kenyan people, one indivisible people in a republic, and that says that the sovereignty is with the people.
Indeed.
So if we remember Raila, let him name be well shrouded in the 2010 Constitution.
Barrack, even as we come to a head of this conversation, and I know that there will be very many conversations in the next coming days. I mean, even after we look at the funeral that will take place and the mourning that, so rightly should happen, there will be political conversations that come into the future. And of course, for us to continue to talk about them is absolutely necessary. One thing that strikes me is the traction on a global scale that Raila Odinga has had. And we can see this from the pouring out that started yesterday and is likely to continue into time. I think of my former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, and the tight friendship that they had. I think of the folks of Hichilema, who was one of the first to send out messages yesterday. Modi, a very good friend of his, and, rules an entire subcontinent, but recognizes the impact that this man had in Kenya. And we're just looking at folks from Kofi Annan, that he was a very good friend of, Thabo Mbeki and Cyril Ramaphosa, who they've had tight relations with. And they all remember this man not just as a statesman, but somebody that would call a dear friend. Can we not forget that kind of traction that he had?
A political giant who is emblematic of the global space that the Kenyan nation has had the potential to occupy, but which we have not occupied. We got off well as a nation. We were the El Dorado of East Africa, the place to go. In the 80s, we used to brag that we were a shining star in a dark night. We were an island of peace in an ocean of turbulence. We were the continental role model. And although our collective fortunes as a nation may have dwindled owing to more dwarfed kind of leadership, some kind of political dwarfism in recent years, we still must take solace in the fact that we have had individuals like Raila Odinga. And if we should urge ourselves to embrace the kind of values and principles they stood for, then we still stand a good chance to occupy that respected space on the global landscape.
On the global landscape. I mean, these next couple of days will definitely be ones to watch. And also, as the nation mourns the loss of Raila Odinga and the conversations that will come out as a result of that. You've alluded to the same, Tony Gachoka, as you have Dr. Muluka. We'll see that. I will be here in the meantime.
So as a goodbye, I want to say goodbye, my friend, Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Rest in peace, Baba. The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. To live in the hearts we leave behind is not to die. The song is ended, but the melody lingers on. Rest in eternal peace, Mzee.
Tony Gachoka, Dr. Barrack Muluka, thank you so much for being here this morning. And we'll continue with these conversations in the future. It's 9 minutes past 8 o'clock. We'll continue after this. Don't go away.
Sunday.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.